I'm going to work on the hand next, and I've decided to put the original painting right up next to the one that I'm working on, just to make it easier to refer back and forth where all the highlights and the shadows go. I am going to moisten the hand with some extender, so I will go ahead and take my large flat brush, get extender in it, wipe the majority off on my edge of my cup, and moisten the hand, really working that into the little crevices and the surface. Try not to overdo. You don't want puddles. Okay, and then I'll just set that brush aside. I will start again with extender and in both ends of my Jillybean Dirty Dancer, and I'm going to use a small one this time. And then both of the ends are going to get wiped off on a paper towel. Alright, just like I did on the face, I am going to start with the highlights in the hand first. And I'm going to use the Americana Highlight Flesh. To me, it's just easier to see the things that are popping out the most towards me, so that's what I like to start with. Okay, this knuckle right here, I want to put like a big circle, and I've got a lot of paint on my brush. I kind of try to smooth the ridges out in the middle of the circle, but then I take my little blender brush and just catch the very outside edge. I try not to go in the middle of the circle with my blender brush because I don't want to remove any of that paint. I just want to soften hard edges. Okay, then let's move on over to the next knuckle on that same finger. I want a round knuckle, but I also want to pull some color into the finger a little bit more. And then soften just the outside edges with the blender side of my brush. Okay, then on that same finger, the fingernail is also going to have highlight in it. I come up the side and across the tip, and then soften the inside edge of that. The finger down below is going to have just a little bit on the very tip of the skin. And turn my brush over and soften. Okay, let's see. Let's do the next finger up behind. We're going to get that knuckle. So I'm making a round circle, and I've got a lot of paint on my brush. Turn it around and soften the outer edges. And let's get the next knuckle above that. And soften. Okay, now that one I also want to pull some into the finger a little bit more. So right in the middle. And soften. Just kind of catching those outer edges. And then also the fingernail on that one. Come down the side here and across the top. A little more paint. And then soften that inside edge. Okay, the finger above that, I'm actually going to kind of hit the top of the finger in front of it and then come through the center area and all the way through And then soften the outside edges, get rid of the hard edges. And the fingernail along the side. And soften. I've got on the hand down here, I've got quite a wide area. You may even want to switch to your larger Dirty Dancer if you need to, but I've got quite a bit. And make sure you get a lot of paint in the middle of that area. Don't be skimpy. Otherwise you have to keep redoing it. And then soften the outside edge. Now I'm feeling a little dry, so I'm going to stop and I'm going to put some more extender in the blender brush itself. And then I still wipe it off, but I've got a little bit more blending power now. So I can kind of activate that outer edge and soften it. And just a little bit in the middle of the other section here, and soften. And I may need to come back and do another coat at the end, but it's better just wait and see after you get all the different layers of colors in, and then see if you need to come back and do any more. And I believe that's it for the highlights, so I'm going to go ahead and wash my brush out in water and start with the next color. I don't need to even wait for this to dry. I can go ahead and start right in with my shadow color. The shadow color is the Shading Flesh, but I am going to add just a little touch of flesh tone into it this time. So I'm going to show you what I've got going here. So here's my flesh tone, and here's my Shading Flesh. Flesh tone, if you remember, is what we base coated the hand in, and I want just a little bit more mixed in. Actually, it might actually be half and half. Let's get a little bit more. That dark is really kind of taking over. Let's do half and half. And I'm going to use that for my first shadow color. Okay. And the shadows on the hands, let's start with the hand all the way up on top. I want just a skinny amount on the top edge coming down, and kind of taper it again when I get to the fingernail. Flip my brush over and just soften away that hard edge. It's almost like it was a thick outline, but I want to soften away any harsh edges. And I want to get under as well. And flip my brush and soften that inside edge. And remember, if it starts getting dry on you, you can always add just a little touch of extender into the paint or into your blender brush, whichever seems to be working better for you. And then I want to get the top or the outside top edge of the fingernail itself, and just soften that. There again, almost like I'm outlining it. And then when I come across the other edge, I do want to basically just kind of outline that front edge of the fingernail and just gently soften that as well. And if you need to switch to a liner brush for that area, that's perfectly fine. Okay, then on the next finger, I want to hit start at the knuckle, but kind of start out tapered. And I am going to put just a drop of extender in my paint because it does feel like I'm getting a little dry. Come across the top of the knuckle, and I think I'll stop where I hit the highlight for now and blend. Okay, I want to be able to see a distinction between the knuckle and the finger. So one has to be light, one has to be dark. So on the finger in front, I need to stop where it touches the shadow on the finger behind. Otherwise they'll just be the same color and you won't see the difference between the two. Then let's go taper it again. So I go pick up again on the other side of the knuckle here. And come down, blend that inside edge. And on the fingernail, go across where the cuticle is and come down the right side, soften. The little thumb that is back behind that's holding the eyeglass, you just fill in with this shadow color to start with. There's no highlights that were on there, so we want that to start out darker. Okay, then back to the finger here again. I want to taper it from the knuckle in the finger in front of it and come down the edge and then soften that with the blender brush. Okay, then let's go to the next one. We'll start with the knuckle. And I'll taper it when I hit the highlight area and stop and blend. And you may even want to just barely catch that top edge so it's not quite such a hard line. You want it to be lots of color, but not quite so harsh. And then down below, I'm almost making like a little triangle that I filled in, and then I soften just that top edge of that. I'm gonna go to the next finger. Start out at the knuckle, come across and taper it by the time I hit the highlight, and soften. And then start on the other side of the knuckle. Hit that top edge and soften. And then down where closer to the fingernail, I want a lot of color there, and then come right against where the fingernail is. And a little bit on the tip, and then soften that inside edge. And in between I am kind of wiping my blender brush off on a paper towel to make sure I'm not putting paint where I don't want, and I try to keep the blender brush pretty clean and free of color. Okay, the finger that's underneath, for now it's going to kind of blend into the one above, but when we get darker that'll help. And soften that, and also the fingernail gets filled in with this color at this stage. There was a lot of shadow there. And that I'm not even going to blend because that's just filling in the fingernail itself. Okay, the back of the hand. I want to come down the back so I kind of taper it from that other knuckle. Come down the back of the hand and soften that inside edge. And then I'm going to get inside the palm of the hand. And I've got, well, I actually do have some on the bottom edge of this baby finger here, but I'm going to wait and come back to that, because if I put that on now, I'm going to lose where that shadow is in the palm of the hand and where the baby finger is, because I'll be getting darker inside where the palm of the hand is. But if I do it the baby finger now, they're going to both be the same color, and I'm going to lose where my guideline is. Okay, so I'm going to come and fill in between those graphite lines. And I will come down further, but I think it's best to just kind of stop and blend at this stage. And you may want to go just a little past your graphite lines because you want to make sure that you can cover them. Let's get just a little bit more paint on because I want to cover those graphite, and I just want a soft edge where I stopped. Okay, and it's better to do it in smaller steps rather than just doing the whole thing. Let's get under the baby finger here, and I'm going to come down the outside edge. And I'll just go that far before I stop and blend. Get a little more extender on my blender brush, wipe it off on my paper towel so that it's clean. And I'm going to continue down the wrist, and I am going to connect color in that wrist area, but just soften where I've stopped. And because this is a little bigger area, if you wanted to, like I said, switch to your larger brush, you sure could. And then let's hit where the little wrinkles are. Pull those in, covering your graphite line. And soften. I want just a little bit more paint yet, I think. So I really want to make sure I cover that graphite. I'm just kind of softening off to one side. Okay. And let's see, let's blend this just a little bit more here. And sometimes I really do just have to kind of look at it and come back and forth with the different colors. Okay, then I am ready for my darker color, which is going to be the Shading Flesh with burnt sienna mixed into it. Sometimes I will use the burnt sienna straight, but that might be a little bit more difficult for blending. You have to really get it thinned down. So let's just take a little precaution. We're going to use some shading flesh and some burnt sienna mixed together. Kind of a cocoa-y color. And it's probably 2 parts shading flesh, 1 part, no, it's opposite. 2 parts burnt sienna, 1 part shading flesh. Okay, and then I'm going to go ahead and put a little extender in there just to loosen it up a little bit, because it was starting to dry on me. Everybody's area is going to be a little bit different. You've got to kind of play with the extender. If you're in an area where your paint dries really quickly, you're going to need more. If it doesn't dry very quickly, then of course you need less. So you just have to kind of experiment with it a little bit. All right. Now I'm going to go back and deepen some areas. I'm going to start with the thumb that's underneath, because I definitely want that to be darker. And I'm actually just going to fill in that top side, but then I'm going to come down the glass and under the finger that's above it and soften that inside edge. Okay, now for the very top finger, I do want a little bit by that knuckle of the other finger that's in front of it, and kind of come along that bottom edge and soften. And I may want to put just a little bit along the cuticle of the fingernail, kind of taper it up the side a little bit. Don't get too carried away. There again, I could have used a liner brush. And I've kind of lost some of my highlight on the tip, so I will come back, put highlight there for sure. Sometimes I'll add just a little bit on the top edge, but I don't want a lot. Okay, then the next finger, I want it darker where it goes behind. Actually, I skipped a finger. This is the third one over. The one next to the baby finger. Get it darker down in that little crevice. Kind of stop where the knuckle area is. Okay, then I'm going to do the finger behind there, where the knuckle is. And I'll taper it where it comes to the knuckle there. Maybe a little bit on the tip. So you notice I'm going to skip a little area there, and I'm going to get the tip instead. And soften. And I want to get across the cuticle. And soften that as well. Okay, a little bit across the top edge, tapering it from that knuckle. It's really almost like an outline. And the same with the one in front of it. starting at the knuckle here. Taper it till I run into the next knuckle. And soften. Okay, then the finger in front. Also want to catch that knuckle and across the top. Soften with the blender. And let's see, then that baby finger has a little bit darker above the fingernail, kind of surrounding the fingernail. Okay, and then I'm going to wait on the finger below. Well, no, I take that back. I'm just going to get some in the fingernail itself. Okay, then back to the palm of the hand here. I'll get in those crevices and come under the baby finger. And I'm going to soften that before I go any further. Now where the crevice is, I want to soften above, but then I want to soften under. That's actually going to get filled in more. Okay, and I'll get the next little crevice. And the one thing I want to try to do is not get them all totally stopping at the same point. Sometimes I forget to check that. And kind of round that a little bit and soften. Wiping my brush off in between, getting the extra paint off. Okay, now if it does look lined up, I'll take my blender brush with a little extender on and kind of wipe some of that color back so that each of those three are just a little bit different, and I can even pull one out a little bit further. Okay, now I do want to put more of the shadow color, the darker shadow color, in the middle of the palm area here, but I don't want it to come out as far as I did the first time, because I want to be able to see the highlight, the other shadow, and then the darker shadow, so that I see a few different layers of color. And if I accidentally get it right up into the highlight, I can always take some of my flesh tone and separate it again. I am going to get some more dark. I'm going to actually get some starting at the bottom here. And then just taper it a little bit coming up. Get that blended.